So let me react to some of your comments. Let me start with a paying customer because he is a member of the channel. His name is Pedro Kai, and as a member, I'm going to start with him. The video that he is reacting to is the one by Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad is a British, I don't want to call him a streamer. He's like a essayist, and he basically used to be sort of in the middle, but now he's dedicated himself to the far right and spends most of his time talking about immigrants, especially those that come from Africa. But also, by the way, the name Sargon of Akkad comes from the Middle East, but he also talks down on people from the Middle East. But sometimes he talks them up if it's to the disadvantage of Africans. So Pedro Kai says, I normally don't even bother with these social commentaries, but since this channel, I can see the potential and value. Unfortunately, I detect deliberate confusion, disinformation, misinformation, some lies, and some high levels of narcissism. Nothing new I don't experience and see daily, but thanks for the exercise. As I said in my comment, this is something you should expect from these type of people. Some people, I don't know, they dabble in the realm of evil and they basically live there. You have obviously seen some of the people that I've talked about, which some of them have disappeared from the internet when they're exposed as liars. And a lot of these people, they just get on the internet, they say stuff that they don't believe, that no normal human could believe, built to trigger people, probably due to boredom. And then a lot of these people, and also money hungry, and a lot of these people, just like Sargon, they start off as well meaning in the beginning, but then they get jaded by their own laziness. I think that's what it is. What really happens is that some people in life, they get kicked around by life and then they want to take it out on somebody. And so they choose the closest thing. And for a lot of these people, it's immigrants. Now, I do agree with you on the characterization of this person as showing high levels of narcissism and stroking themselves, but it's even worse than this. This person used to be completely on the other side. I remember there was a debate where Nick Fuentes and this person were on the same panel, and this person went out of his way to separate himself from Nick Fuentes, and now he's sounding Nick Fuentes-ish. But that's not the only reason why I commented it. Like I said, if we allow these people to keep talking and then normal people don't talk back to these people, what's going to happen is they're going to run the narrative. They're going to convince people that what they're saying makes sense because, look, nobody is even brave enough to challenge them. And the reality is half of these people run scared when the first time someone challenges them, what they do is run away back into their corner, and then they change their philosophy on life and then come back with a probably more ridiculous point of view. As I said, it's called selecting for stupidity. If you can't convince the wise, what you have to do is go around them. Now, normally I don't respond to political stuff because I think a lot of the political stuff is bait. But this one, I had to respond to it because I'm seeing a shift in this person's specific content. And like I said, I used to talk to this person a lot. Well, talk about this person, which, by the way, reminds me, and anybody who saw this, they can comment. Did you see the debate about Black Egyptians between Metabeshe and King's Monologue? I made a video about Metabeshe a long time ago, and I thought he stopped caring about that topic, but apparently talked. And by the end of it, they both basically agreed that the Egyptians were Black, which is weird. I did not expect that from Metabeshe. I thought he would be more on the other side, but he was a good sport. It's like a 5-hour video, so I will say that I thought King's Monologue did a good job at convincing him. I would have liked if he allowed him to speak a little bit more, but other than that, everything was pretty good. So let me go to the next question. The next comment is from a different video. It's from my video that I made about the connections between West Africa and Egypt. And it says, this connection to West Africa goes against the mainstream, yet lacks any counterproof. It's like they forget that all Africans first originated in East Africa. The Nilo Saharan peoples are the embodiment of this connection, since they've served as a bridge between the arid north and the semi arid Sahel, since these regions began forming after the African humid period. Chadic genetics reflects this, as they speak an Afro-Asiatic language while being predominantly of Nilo-Saharan ancestry and carry a Eurasian haplogroup. This Nilo-Saharan ancestry reaches as high as 80%, even though these people live at a crossroads, which only highlights the impact of tropical Africans in the region. This is also why Niger Congo languages have similarities with Afroasiatic ones, as the region of Chad is where these linguistic groups would have coexisted during the human period. It's just refreshing to see the Saharan divide myth being buried once and for all. Well, I agree with most of that, and I agree that it's proof for a lot of people, but there are still a number of people who do not believe it and will need more evidence. And so that is the thing that I'm most concerned about, which is trying to gather the evidence. One of the connections that needs to be made is the fact that the Afro-Asiatic languages that went to the Semitic areas still carry some of the Afro-Asiatic language history that is left over in Africa. If that can be fully proven, then I think they will be willing to accept it. Now, one of the reasons why they don't accept it is because of a single word, Afrocentric, which is why, even though it's the most believed thing by most Egyptologists that these languages must have originated somewhere in Africa, there's a lot of people who believe, simply because of this word, that there's something flawed about that take. I'll give you some examples, but we don't really need them. Normally, people, as you know, believe the mainstream, but the mainstream says Afro-Asiatic languages, which, to remind everybody, includes Arabic, includes Fulani, includes the Chadic languages all over Chad, which there's, over 50 of them, includes Ethiopian languages, includes some Sudanic languages, some of the Beja languages, includes ancient Egyptian, and then, of course, the whole branch of Semitic, Akkadian, and all of these languages. That whole branch in the mainstream, not Afrocentric, not the mainstream, is thought to originate somewhere in Africa. But when it comes to this mainstream, they go, nah, there's something wrong with this interpretation. It's like, well, you always believe the mainstream in almost every other case. Why is it that now that it's the mainstream, you're going the other way? One of the honest channels on YouTube that I like is a language group called I Love Languages. This channel, all it does is just cover mainstream grouping of languages. For example, when they cover the Bantu languages, which are called Niger Congo, they, without even editorializing, they get people who actually speak the languages. I don't know how they do this, but they actually get the people who speak the languages and they compare these languages. This is one of the things that inspired me personally to do it as well on my channel, especially with numbers, because that's the easiest one to see similarities between two different languages.
Andy here, how are you? Let's talk about the Afro-Asiatic languages. The Afro-Asiatic languages are a language family of about 400 languages.
Now you might be thinking, if this channel just covers it in the mainstream, isn't that a problem? And the answer is no, because one thing I care more about is consistency more than I care about any of the other thing. You can argue with someone who is consistent with their opinions. You can't argue with someone who is slippery. For example, a lot of these slippery people, they will say they believe in the mainstream, they trust the mainstream. Are you an Egyptologist? All of these things. And then when the mainstream disagrees with them, they'll go, yeah, there's probably some mistake somewhere. If you're pure mainstream with it, that's fine. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, if you're alternative, that you can't look at the mainstream, but you can't sit there and say all the mainstream is good, and then when it disagrees with you, you say no, it's bad. You can't be that slippery. Again, that's why I like this channel.
Most linguists divide the family into 6 branches: Berber, Chadic, Cushitic, Egyptian, Semitic, and Omotic. The vast majority of Afroasiatic languages are considered indigenous to the African continent, including all those not belonging to the Semitic branch.
This channel is also not just covering the Afroasiatic language, they cover every language I've ever heard of. In fact, they're actually one of my greatest sources when I find out about other languages in Africa, because they've got an entire video which you guys can look up. Actually, I can link it, which it's a Niger Congo thing where they just show every single Niger Congo language, which there are hundreds. And these Niger Congo languages have overlap. Some of them I can easily tell, like, okay, these languages are definitely connected. But others, they sound so different. They almost sound, like they're North African or something. But that is why I actually like this channel, and why, like I said, to me, I've got no problem with the mainstream. There will always be a mainstream. Whether you agree with it or not, there will always be a mainstream. Even if this version of it, the quote unquote Afrocentrist, became the mainstream, there would still be some underdogs out there who complain about that mainstream. The next question: a lot of Northern Africans seems to be dried up rivers and lake beds and not the sandy dunes. I'm not even going to continue. Let's first address this first part. So, yes, one of the ways that people can tell that North Africa was like this is because they can see these. But here's the problem: most of the uh, Sahara, you can't tell. Most of it just looks like dunes and dunes and dunes. And you can't even imagine that some of those places were just flat land with trees and rivers and families and all of that until you start digging. You know what's really bad? The Sahara is so huge that it remains unexplored for the most part. And I don't mean unexplored in the way that some of the conspiracy theorists mean, where they mean if you dig, you're going to find an ancient city of Atlantis or something like that. I mean the real unexplored, where I guess two ancient cities were already found in North Africa. One of them was in Morocco. I think the other one is in Libya, just in the last 10 years. Also, remember, this pot was very popular throughout history, and a lot of the people who lived there were Berbers who went back and forth between Egypt and West Africa, which is how pottery spread throughout the regions. So let's carry on. We usually associate the Sahara. This explains why the only indigenous, tricky term when dealing with such deep time spans. Let's address that word as well, indigenous and all of these. So I use these words because they're common words, but words like indigenous, native, all of these are time things. I mean, are humans indigenous to Africa? Yes. So does that mean other humans can't be indigenous to any other place? So for example, they say Europeans are indigenous to Europe, but you can't be. They're not a different species. In order to be indigenous to a different area, if you go by real biology, you have to be a completely different species, which is why you say a certain type of animal is indigenous. Like, for example, when they talk about Neanderthals are not indigenous to Europe, but because you don't find any Neanderthals in Africa, prior to their back migration, because you don't find them anywhere, they're non-indigenous to Africa. But humans are the other way around. And so this is the problem with the word indigenous. It's like it depends what you're trying to get at. This is why some people have a huge problem with this word melanated, because people are like, oh, no, 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 we've decided that sub-Saharan African means you have these DNA markers and blah, blah, blah. And then we go, no, we did not sign up for that. Black does not mean you have that. It means you've got melanin. Now, you would think that that would be it, right? They go, okay, fine, if you got melanin, you're black, but they don't. And then they don't even go by their own standard. Because, like I said, the ancient Egyptians were definitely dark skinned, but they're always portrayed by light skinned people. So let's carry on. What'd you say? A tricky term when dealing with such deep time spans. Yes. People that have been in the region long enough to adapt to it are the Nilo-Saharans. Yes, that is another important thing that we need to talk about, which is, even if, let's just grant the information, which by the way, I even believe this to some degree, but even if the people who came from the Middle East were like pale white people, after, let's take the timeline. So some of them assume that they came there like 30,000 years ago. Do you really think that in 30,000 years they would still be pale skinned living in the hottest part of the earth? Like, does anybody actually believe that? And also, here's another thing. They don't know that a lot of the reason why people look the way they do in the Middle East, it's not recent. The way that a lot of the people in the Middle East look like has to do with Indo-European fusion, Asiatic fusion, mixture with Europeans, mixture with Indians. It's like they're a weird mix of a lot of people. But then people go, no, they've always looked like that. How can they? When all DNA shows that these people are highly mixed. Are you saying that the people they mixed with were all look the same as well? It doesn't make sense. And also, we can use a completely separate area. Take the Bantu, for example. If you take Bantus from one part of the world to another part of the world, they've only been separated for a couple thousand years, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years from one another. And some of them look completely different from one another. You have pygmy Bantu people, and then you have tall Bantu people. That happened in like 4,000 years. You telling me in, I don't know, 30,000 years or something, nobody from the Middle East changed? They just always look the same. So let's carry on. Peoples that have been in the region long enough to adapt to the Nilo-Saharan type, as they have the exact features you would expect from people living in the world's warmest savanna. 100%. Also, there is this thing where it says you don't adapt necessarily for the sun. So it's not the sun that changes you. There's like genetic markers that changes you. But the reason why it's associated with the sun, it's not the sun that's changing you. The reason why is because if you're too pale in those areas and you don't have that marker, you will start to suffer the consequences. And then you have to develop technologies to survive in those areas, as a lot of people have. You can easily do this. Go find someone who's very pale skin. You two go both stand in the sun and then see what happens. So another comment that I got was from Sumaya Muhammad, who said, "It's so sad to see you culture appropriating other cultures and civilization, especially that what you mentioned here is the land of Punt, a civilization that existed in the Somalia and parts of Eritrea, but mainly Somali coast. Nice try though." So basically, I don't know where he's getting this from, because clearly I believe that the land of, I've got very long videos, which I will link, that talk about the fact that Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea is where the land of Punt is. My point was not to say that the land of Punt was in the Sahel. My point was to say that in Africa, there's Stratopedia, which is present in the land of Punt, is present in the Sahel, is present in North Africa, and it's present in sub-Saharan African regions as far down as South Africa. This is one of the ways of differentiating the people of Africa from people who are not from there, because other places they really don't have Statopedia. I mean, they say they do, but they don't. Having Statopedia doesn't necessarily mean you are Calipigian, except obviously in Africa, which it is highly liked. So, buddy, this is just a misunderstanding. You're forgiven. I hope this clears it up. Now, some people started commenting on what he said, so let's see what they had to say. From user DP2S and more numbers, how is it connecting one African culture to another appropriation? That is a true fact. I think it's because he misunderstood what I was saying, to be honest. But it's okay for Arab and European to connect an African culture and their civilization to Eurasian culture and civilization. Makes no sense. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about now. I see what you're saying. He never mentioned Somalia. This is about ancient Central Saharan and Sahelian cultures. So I will correct and say, yes, I mentioned the land of Punt. And when I mentioned it, I mentioned that it was part of East Africa. So I don't even know what we're arguing about here. And then the next person, well, Punt civilization is not Sahelian culture. Thank you, sir. I never said it was. So to clear it up, Sumaya Muhammad, I think we're on the same side here. The land of Punt is 100% in the eastern parts of Africa, especially the Horn of Africa. I think it's bigger than what people say it is. It might even reach as far as Kenya or something like that. But I accept that it's in the Horn. The next comment is from my video that I made talking about the panel that was basically saying all kinds of racist stuff. So this is what he has to say. Bro, I give you credit for being able to sit through that nonsense. I, for one, cannot and will not do it. I know the playbook of all those tap dancing racial epithet, and it's tiresome. Yep. I agree with you that it's pretty tiresome, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get you to slow down. It's like a boxing match. They're just jabbing until you give up, and then they'll start, throwing the real ones out there once you can't move fast enough away from the punches. And the way you do it is you just make sure you're at a right pace or a right distance and throw a few of your own, which is what I'm doing in this video. The next comment says, a lot of those types on the panel are likely secretly funded by conservatives. Let's stop right there because you said the magic words. There are a lot of conservatives of color who have been discovered who basically work with the other side, and that's the thing they do now, which is grab people. It's like they think it's a gotcha, like, oh, they won't attack someone of their own race because that's their whole thing. It's like, nope, the stupid opinion is stupid no matter who's saying it. Remember there was that North Korean girl who turned out she was being paid by the right, and she was coming back with the whole like super Jesus angle. And then there's by the way, there's a whole bunch of them. And then they always get exposed. Remember the trad wife movement? And then it turns out that all these women who are quote unquote trad wives have had children out of wedlock, even though it's rare within their community. The ones who are specifically saying the trad wives tend to do that. It's weird. By the way, I'll tell you why it's probably weird, because Why would a trad wife go on TV and start promoting that lifestyle? Like a traditional wife, like it's not something to push, like it's some kind of gang. You just do it if you like it. If you want to be home with your husband, you just do it. Like, what's the whole movement thing? What's that going to do? And some people are like, I get no respect for being a traditional wife. It's like, but are you doing it for respect, or are you doing it because you believe that's how you should live? Like, some people don't get respect for being nuns. Like, does that mean that they should stop? Yes, so they're funded by conservative think tanks. Yep. And by the way, a lot of them are actually not just people of color. There are also a lot of, other people, and a lot of trolls as well. And others, they just go in that direction because they just test the waters and realize which one makes more money. It's like putting your finger up to the wind. Conservative opinions now are considered controversial, so they make more money. But so let's carry on. Conservative think tanks and PAC or PACs, apparently other people, black people, are their only issue and no one else. You will hear them say leftists all the time. They'll obsess over that, which is another word for black people, but they will obsess over that. And you'll even hear Brandon sometimes say the big problem is not black people, it's white leftists or whatever. So you'll hear that. And again, I'm not saying that the left is perfect. There's some stuff they went too far on definitely. But whenever the left does a mistake, it seems like black people suffer for it. Their brand, which by the way is why they always vote Democrat, because the other group is gonna, like, if going back to the boxing analogy, they're going to knock you out if you allow them to. Their brand of political conservatism is only about ninjas. That's another thing that was ridiculous about that video. I almost didn't finish it. It was like so weird to hear somebody say the word ninjas so many times. Nothing on legislation, taxes, Supreme Court, foreign. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you here. Nobody in politics talks about these things except like actual people who are in that. The reason why they don't is because the audience is gonna tune out. I'm sorry. Go watch mainstream politics. Go watch non-mainstream politics. As soon as you start mentioning it, I could challenge you to find people who could name like things, specific things like bills and all of these things that are out there. I challenge you to find them who could name these things. And once they start saying it, like, okay, here it is. This is what it says. We're going to read it out loud. This is what this specific paper says. They're going to be like, I don't care. So they have to talk about it in a way. Remember when I said that the way to communicate, it's half on the audience and half on the communicator. So one of the things that they do, which is why they always have titles, which are great, like, oh, this is the Save America bill or whatever. So they always have these titles because people only care about that. So that's basically how things work. People like entertainment. They don't like to be bored. So you sit down, you tell them something in a way where they can digest it. They're not going to fully understand it because in order to fully understand it, you have to go in. It's like trying to teach someone algebra without doing the math. Being like, okay, well, there's like numbers and then there's like letters. It's like at some point, you're just going to give up. Also, when it comes to foreign policy, a lot of foreign policy, if you notice, is not even the policy part of it is not important. Most of it is just what is the racial makeup of this group? What is the racial makeup of this group? What's the religion of this group? What's this code? What are they doing? All that. People aren't concerned about actual policy, about exactly what was discussed by what president and who are the ambassadors and who are the, who can go back and forth and exactly what countries allow people to be born in their country and then convert to citizenship there and all that. Nobody's concerned about none of that. So to carry on, very interesting. Guess they're only paid according to how many times they can mention ninjas. Yeah. So Joe Bailey was the final commenter on there. He said, handkerchief head, something, whatever. I can't say the whole thing, unfortunately. Sorry, because it's not safe for YouTube. But I just want to acknowledge, you can go check it out yourself. Acknowledge that I see what you're saying. So the last comment will be Joel Varado, who says, your Chad videos really highlight your knowledge of the entire continent in a way Chad filters out the true students of African history from the pretenders. Chad's location makes it relevant in any time period. Africans have been moving in and out of the region for tens of thousands of years. So in my next video where I comment, I will react to this. But for now, I'll say thank you very much. Consider becoming a member, donating. Super chat is what it's called in YouTube. Thank you very much. What else? Is there something else we need to talk about? Put it in the comments.